Our guest today is the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. He has served as U.S. Attorney for 7 months. Our guest today is the top federal law enforcement official for the 18 counties across the top tier of Illinois, with a population of roughly 9 million people. He was born in Kansas City and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. Our guest today graduated from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where he also earned his law degree. He is married and is a proud father of 3 beautiful children. But to show you how smart he is, his mother is here today. Let us give a City Club welcome to Judy Fardon. Judy, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you very much. You classed up the whole joint. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, Zach Fardon. Zach.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Father Ryan, for that invocation. I want to take the opportunity to offer Father Ryan a job to come do closing arguments at 219 South Dearborn. I've chosen a somber topic today, so with your forgiveness and indulgence, I am just going to jump right in. You know, my office focuses on a lot of significant areas like terrorism and public corruption and financial fraud and cyber crimes. But I'm going to focus my comments today on just one area, and that is violence in the city of Chicago. And I'm going to start by asking you to look with me at who is being shot and killed in our city. This year so far, at least 659 people have been shot in Chicago. At least 110 people have been killed. Of those, 20 of them are kids under 18 years old. I want to take a look at who some of these kids were. On January 5 of this year, Raymond Galloway, a 16-year-old, was shot and killed in Douglas. On January 11th, Marquise Harris, a 16-year-old, was shot and killed in Woodlawn. On January 26th, Miguel Navarrete, a 15-year-old, was shot and killed in South Lawndale. And on February 5th, Markeo Carr, 17 years old, was shot and killed in Rogers Park. On February 9th, Ronald Hayes, a 17-year-old, was shot and killed in the near West Side. On February 12th, a 14-year-old, Vinzel Richardson, was shot and killed in Woodlawn. On April 1st, Kamari Anthony, a 5-year-old, was shot in the stomach. And the same day, Caden Carlvin, a 3-year-old, was shot in the shoulder. Thankfully, these young men did not die. On April 5th, Michael Florney, a 16-year-old, was shot and killed in Burnside. On April 9th, Adrian Soto, a 17-year-old, was shot and killed in Chicago Lawn. On April 11th, Garika Barnes, a 17-year-old girl, was shot and killed in Woodlawn. On April 15th, Keno Glass, 16 years old, shot and killed in Rogers Park. On April 19th, Jordan Means, a 16-year-old, shot and killed in South Chicago. On April 28th, India Martin, 14-year-old, shot and killed in New City. 10 days ago, on May 11th, Vaughn Holman, a 15-year-old, was shot and killed in West Pullman. Since 2007, over 700 kids under 19 years old have been killed in our city. So where is this happening? Chicago Police Department breaks Chicago into 22 police districts. 6 of them on the southwest and south side are among the most violent districts, and in recent years account for nearly 50% of all the homicides that are happening in our city. These districts are violent, but they're also home to some beautiful neighborhoods. The 4th District is home to Avalon Park and Calumet Heights and South Deering, among others. The 7th District is home to Englewood and Greater Grand Crossing. The 9th District is home to McKinley Park and Brighton Park and New City and Gage Park. The 10th District is home to Lawndale and to the Lower West Side and to Garfield Ridge. The 11th District is home to Humboldt Park and Garfield Park in North Lawndale. The 15th district is home to the neighborhood of Austin. So why are kids getting shot and killed in these neighborhoods? Gangs, major gangs like the Gangster Disciples and the Latin Kings and the Black Disciples and the Black Pea Stones. And more now, if you focus in on any one gang, you have gang factions, Gangster Disciple factions like Brick Squad, Geek Squad, Dro City, Black Pea Stone factions like No Limit Stones, Titanic Stones, Apache Stones, Latin King factions like Murder City, Spanish Harlem, the Boulevards, Black Disciples factions, Dog Pound PDs, Lamron, Dro City. The 4th districts, those neighborhoods are seeing the Black Disciples and the Black Pea Stones and the Gangster Disciples and the Latin Kings. In the 7th districts, those neighborhoods have to live with the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples and the Mickey Cobras. In the 9th district, those neighborhoods are seeing the Black Pea Stones and the Gangster Disciples and La Raza and Latin Kings and Latin Saints and Satan Disciples and 2-6. In the 10th district, they see the Ambrose Street Gang and the Gangster Disciples and the Latin Kings and the New Breeds and the Satan Disciples and 2-6. In the 11th district, they see the conservative vice lords and the Four Corner Hustlers and the Gangster Disciples and the traveling vice lords. In the 15th district, they see the conservative vice lords and the Four Corner Hustlers and the Gangster Disciples and the Mafia Insane vice lords and the New Breeds and the traveling vice lords. So I'm stopping the slide presentation. I wanted to start with those slides because I think we need to starkly define the problem, to look at it, to understand what is happening and where and why. This is a gang problem, and it is a gang factions problem. It is a disparate impact on certain neighborhoods problem. It's a fairness problem, a right and wrong problem. This is an economic problem. It's a reputational problem. This is a community problem. It's a church problem. It's a parenting problem. This is a local, state, and federal government problem. This is a law enforcement problem. But most of all, this is a social justice problem. It is my problem, and it's your problem. It's our problem. We have in this room business leaders and law leaders and civic leaders, and we have thoughtful people and we have powerful people. I appreciate your being here today. And I want us to talk about these issues today and tomorrow and every day and every week till we get to a better place than where we are now. To change what you just saw is going to take a sustained investment, involvement, and commitment from the government and from you, from the business, legal, and civic communities in Chicago. It's going to take both of us working together and with a long view. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We are talking about a generational change. But we can do it, and we have to do it, and so we will. I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about what we're doing right now at the United States Attorney's Office. Our office here has about 150 assistant U.S. attorneys, about 20 of whom are in our civil division. And that leaves us with about 130 criminal litigators or federal prosecutors. Among those 130 federal prosecutors, for years, the largest group has been dedicated to issues related to violent crime. And historically, those federal prosecutors have worked under the auspices of our narcotics and gangs section. And over the past couple of decades, that section has pumped out some major successful prosecutions, narcotics cases, conspiracy cases, gun cases against those major gangs, the Latin Kings, the Gangster Disciples, the Black Disciples, among others. And as successful as those prosecutions have been in dismantling gang leadership, they, of course, did not represent an end to the violence. At their time and their place, they helped, but the violence did not stop. And unfortunately, over the last decade, the gang problem in Chicago has gotten more complex rather than less. Those factions that I described make this issue more challenging for law enforcement to grab a hold of and tackle. Many gangs now no longer have the clearly delineated, centralized leadership with a corporate hierarchical structure where we can identify the CEO and the top brass and investigate and indict and lock up those folks as we did with Larry Hoover and Jeff Fort and Augustine Zambrano and others. Instead, more and more often, we're seeing the violence is between factions within the gangs. and not for purposes of the gang enterprise, narcotics or otherwise, but instead, more and more often, these shootings and killings are for base, indiscriminate, and even petty reasons: revenge, disrespect, perceived disrespect, sometimes over social media, kids pulling the trigger over nothing. And so our problem has changed. And as our problem changes, so must we. After I got into office in October of last year, I put my head down and I did my due diligence. I read everything I could read on crime, violent crime in Chicago. I met with the lawyers in my office. I met with judges and defense lawyers and law enforcement. I went to court to observe what we were doing there. I ingrained myself in our major investigations and our programmatic efforts. And through that process, I came to a conclusion that was shared by the senior leadership in my office. We decided that while we are proud of what we have done in the past, now was and is the right time to write the words violent crime on a piece of paper, draw a circle around it, assign a cadre of talented federal prosecutors, and say to those folks, your job, your sole mission is to help this city and this district tamp down on violent crime, period. And you are empowered to work together, to think strategically, and to use all the tools in the federal shed to accomplish that mission: the federal narcotics laws, racketeering, money laundering, fraud, the federal robbery and extortion laws, violence prevention and reentry tools, means of trying to stop these kids on the front end from shooting at each other. So that's exactly what we did. In March, I announced internally a restructuring of our criminal division, and on March 31st, that went into place, and with it, the creation of a violent crime section at the U.S. Attorney's Office. The sole mission of that section is to help this city and this district tamp down on violent crime. I believe that the standing up of a violent crime section at our office is opportune right now. The nature, extent, and quality of cooperation and collaboration among local, state, and federal law enforcement is, in my view, at an all-time high in this city. As somebody who worked here as a federal prosecutor in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, and who has been a federal prosecutor in another city, in another district, I will tell you I believe we have a uniquely strong and committed law enforcement community in Chicago right now. Let me give you a few examples of what makes me say that. We have in this city monthly collaborative law enforcement meetings attended by the Chicago Police Department, the FBI, DEA, ATF, IRS, HSI, and others, where we sit down and talk about the most violent criminals in the city of Chicago. I often attend those meetings myself. They're attended by senior prosecutors in my office and senior prosecutors with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. We get in a room, we sit around a large table, and we talk about specific individuals and investigations. Information flows freely between the city, the state, and the feds. And then we leave that room and go out and work collaboratively to make cases on those most violent criminals. And then we come back together 30 days later and we sit down and we talk about what we've done and what more we can do. And my office works closely with Anita Alvarez's office to make sure that through that process we're bringing the best cases against the worst offenders in the right forums. Another example, aside and apart from those meetings, for over 2 years now, we have had in this district a strike force, a joint local, state, and federal strike force called the OCDF Strike Force, which is comprised of top-notch officers and agents from the Chicago Police Department, DEA, FBI, ATF, HSI, the United States Marshal Service, and various sheriff's offices. And the officers and agents assigned to the OCDF Strike Force work together full-time in integrated units under one roof in the city of Chicago, with the focused mission of attacking major drug trafficking organizations and gangs at the choke point between cartels and street-level distribution, which typically means gangs. My office as a prosecutor embedded with the OCDF Strike Force, and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office as a prosecutor embedded with the OCDF Strike Force. That is a truly remarkable cross-pollination and collaboration among local, state, and federal law enforcement, and exactly the kind of thing that we're going to need to move the needle on violence in this city. A third example, Project Safe Neighborhoods. More than a decade ago, law enforcement in Chicago recognized that a disproportionate number of those shootings and killings were occurring in the 6 Chicago police districts I just showed you. And so we started an initiative called Project Safe Neighborhoods, or PSN. and created a local, state, and federal task force called the PSN Task Force, the mission of which was to use the gun laws, including the federal gun statutes, to go after the most violent offenders in those 6 districts. The PSN Task Force is more than a decade old and still going strong. It's comprised of officers from the Chicago Police Department and agents from ATF and prosecutors from my office and prosecutors from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. The task force meets monthly, and beyond those meetings, every 30 days or so, a prosecutor from my office and a prosecutor from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office sit down and go through pending gun cases and make strategic decisions about which defendants to charge where with gun crimes. So those are 3 concrete examples of my overarching point, which is we have a truly progressive and collaborative law enforcement community in Chicago right now. And I believe that the standing up of this violent crime section at the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to help us continue and build upon those programmatic successes. Apropos of that, I want to take a few minutes to talk to you about another aspect of who we are and what we do. And this area is something that, in my view, not enough people realize we do at the United States Attorney's Office. When people think of us, they think we carry a stick. We're enforcers. We're prosecutors. But we also offer a carrot. We try to help and incentivize people not to commit violent crimes. Thousands of offenders, people who are convicted of committing acts of violence, are released from the state and federal prison system in Illinois every year. And when we started Project Safe Neighborhoods, we had data showing that a large percentage of those returning offenders were coming home, re-entering the very neighborhoods that you saw in that slide presentation. And we had statistics showing that an alarming number of them would commit another act of violence within 3 years of coming home from prison. And so the PSN Task Force wanted to find a way to stop that cycle of violence, and they developed and designed monthly parolee forums or offender notification meetings. Those monthly parolee forums have been going now in Chicago for over a decade, and in fact are now the model for similar forums in major cities across the United States. So what do they look like? Well, they occur monthly, and they rotate between the neighborhoods I showed you. And there are typically 20 to 30 recently released parolees who are coming home to the host neighborhood. And the goal of the forums is to give those attendees a chance to make an informed choice about what they're going to do now that they're coming home. At the outset of these forums, they hear from a Chicago Police Department commander, the local commander for their neighborhood. They hear from a ATF agent and a senior prosecutor from my office and a senior prosecutor from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And those folks talk to the attendees about the dangers of reoffending. The emphasis is on gun crimes. Often these are young men coming out of their first stint in prison, and they don't fully appreciate that because they're now convicted felons just by picking up a gun, they would be committing a crime that carries a substantial sanction. We explain that to them, not in a heavy-handed way, in an honest way. We tell them about the tragedies that we see every day when it comes to felons in possession of firearms. So that's the heavy part. There's also an uplifting part. At these forums, we have social services organizations who are terrific and are there to provide the attendees help and advice. For example, City Colleges of Chicago often participates, and we'll talk about GED courses or college course opportunities. Other social services providers offer help, expertise, and advice, things that range from getting a haircut to how to prepare a resume and go out and find a job. And at every one of these forums, the attendees will hear from a successful ex-offender who will tell his story and explain and encourage these young, often young men, about how and why, while challenging, it is possible to make good choices and get their lives back on track. I have attended these meetings. They are compelling, they are emotional, and they work. Early in the PSN program, we saw the wisdom of having an arm's-length academic examination, and so we partnered with top researchers from the University of Chicago, Andrew Papachristos and Tracy Mears, who are now at Yale but still part of the PSN Chicago program. And the analytical work that Professors Papachristos and Mears have done fortifies the success of these parolee forums. They have found that offenders who attend the forums are 30% less likely to commit another act of violence than those who do not. 30% less likely. That is moving the needle. And so these forums and our reentry and violence prevention efforts in Chicago are a real success story, and one that we are continuing. In fact, right now, we're expanding those efforts into the juvenile offender arena. It may not surprise you, given what you've seen, to hear me say that when it comes to predicting violent behavior and social problems later in life, a key inflection point is around 13 or 14 years of age. Kids who carry guns and commit acts of violence at that age are much more likely to repeat those acts of violence and end up incarcerated. So last year, the PSN Task Force in Chicago applied for federal grant money to launch an initiative, and we have titled that initiative our Youth Outreach Forums. And the Department of Justice awarded that grant, and this month we launched in the city of Chicago. In partnership with the Chicago Police Department, Chicago Public Schools, the Cook County Juvenile Probation Department, and other agencies and social services providers, we're taking the success of those parolee forums and applying that model to at-risk youth. The target audience, the specific target audience, are juvenile probationers and parolees who committed gun and violent offenses. And the goal of these forums is to provide them long-term intensive mentoring and wraparound services that will help them address their needs and prevent recidivism. We have started the program in just 2 districts, the 7th and the 11th, which includes Inglewood and Garfield Park and Lower Humboldt Park. And we designed the forums to educate these kids about law enforcement, to humanize law enforcement, and to provide them with options and incentives to reassimilate to their schools and to community organizations and activities, basically trying to give these kids alternatives to the gang route. And we also have partnered with the not-for-profit Youth Guidance, which is going to be selectively providing long-term mentoring services to these to some of these kids through a program of theirs called Becoming a Man, or BAM, which some of you may have heard of. So I'm very proud that we in Chicago are at the cutting edge, continuing to lead the way forward when it comes to violence prevention efforts. I believe that these initiatives are critical to our long-term success in fighting violence in the city of Chicago. And I'm committed to continuing them as long as it takes to help those unfairly afflicted neighborhoods. So I hope that gives you a better sense as to who we are and what we do at the U.S. Attorney's Office when it comes to violent crime. We are and will be vigorous in prosecuting the most violent criminals in the city of Chicago, but we cannot arrest our way out of this gang problem. And from a law enforcement perspective, that's why I think it's so important that we continue our violence prevention and reentry efforts. I don't want to prosecute violent offenders if instead we can prevent them from taking that act of violence in the first instance. It is my great pleasure, not to mention being fun and cool, to get to work with the leadership from the Chicago Police Department and the federal agencies and the state. I truly believe we have a passionate group and a like-minded group, a group that is committed to taking a comprehensive approach to tamping down on violence in the city. I can tell you that we are working hard, we are working thoughtfully, and we are working together. And we are in this for the long haul. That said, law enforcement is a piece, but only a piece of this puzzle. And so I've reached the point in my remarks where I'm turning to you, and I'm going to make an ask. I ask that each of you think about this problem. Think about this problem and how you can own it. You, your company, your law firm, your community organization, your church, your neighborhood. These are not war zones. These neighborhoods are not separate and discrete from our city. They are our city. These are our neighborhoods, filled with wonderful, law-abiding, decent Chicagoans, citizens, colleagues, neighbors who, just like you and me, deserve to feel safe and to be safe in the neighborhood they call home. That is my problem, and it's your problem. It belongs to all of us, as any social justice issue does. The challenges we face are daunting, but they are finite. Working together, we can make change real. and we have to. Kids are dying. So let's get to work. I appreciate your having me here today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
As you know, the City Club is cutting edge. Our next program will be on violence in Chicago, so there's no connection. We didn't, believe me, didn't plan it like this. It just happens. Okay, first question. Jesse Ruiz, Board of Education and some law firm. Okay. Can you please comment on the diversity of the U.S. Attorney's Office and your thoughts on how it impacts the work of the office?
Thank you. Yeah, so I will start by saying the office is more diverse than it was when I was hired in 1997, which I think is a wonderful and important thing. Next thing I'll say is there is no greater frustration than a hiring freeze, which encumbers my ability and our ability in the office to bring people in, including diverse assistant U.S. attorneys. I'm somebody who absolutely believes that we improve competitively when we have diversity, not to mention the additional credibility that it gives our office. And given the kind of work we do, including what I just talked about, I think the point can't be lost about how important it is that we be diverse. There are two ways to get there, one of which is hiring, and the good news is the freeze has just been lifted. We are actually seeing candidates through the pipeline, which is why I was able to offer Father Ryan a job. Doesn't help me on the diversity, but surely it'll help somehow.
Help you with the jury.
Yeah. Say another prayer for me, Father. I'm just one of the. But the other. So we certainly can and will be thoughtful about diversity in the hiring process. I believe we have been and we will be. The other is just to make sure we're manifesting a culture of inclusion and making sure that we are exactly the kind of office that is reflective of our community and that our community would expect us to be. I think we do a good job with that, but it's something that I'm mindful of and that we're always looking to improve upon.
By the way, we do have two people, our staff at City Club P and City Club J over there. If you have a question, raise your hand. They'll pick it up. Now, Zach, you've been getting a pretty kind of a hello, and everyone's really nice, and no sandbag questions. Welcome to the City Club. Here we go. Jay? Jane Johnson, where are you, Jane? Raise your hand. There you go. Although both did dishonorable things, do you believe Blagojevich's sentence was fair compared to Jesse Jackson Jr. because he has an illness, and can you distinguish between the fairness of the sentence differences if you're able to do so? What a great City Club question.
So this is easy. The reality is this is going to sound like a punt, and it is a convenient punt because I am conflicted from the Blagojevich matter. I represented a major witness in that case when I was in private practice, and so I can't comment. Having said that, I will say, generally speaking, there is and will be and has been and will be a healthy debate about, sentencing and whether sentencing is proportionate and fair in light of particular facts and circumstances. The one thing I can tell you is, as with everything, and we have a number of current and former assistant U.S. attorneys and leaders in this office who know this too well, we're hard on ourselves about everything, including sentencing, and making darn sure we're as fair as we can be in making sentencing recommendations. And I can assure you that we didn't actually handle the Senator Jackson sentencing, but with any public corruption case or any case at all, it is something that we take as seriously as any other aspect of our job. It is the least fun, the headiest, and in many ways the most important part of what we do.
Good answer, Merle? Yeah, I thought so. Nancy Andre, we had the question about diversity. I think he answered that one already. Now we have Keith Kalinowski. Why does Chicago seem unique in having such a high murder rate, especially in comparison to New York City and L.A.? What can we learn from them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you could spend months, believe me, reading literature about those issues. I mean, one thing I would say is our reputation is worse than our reality when it comes to the actual murder rate. We are not in the top 10 murder rates in this country and have not been for a while. And last year, in fact, was our lowest murder rate in this city since 1966. And if you go back and look at the murder statistics from the 90s and even into the early 20-aughts, they were much worse than they are now. You know, having said that, I'm not sure I would include LA, but certainly New York has done amazing things in terms of the bringing down their murder rate over the course of a long period of time. And it is something that we have studied and look at and borrow aspects from. And I know that Superintendent McCarthy has talked quite a bit about this. He was a product of the New York Police Department system. So I do think that kind of question and comparative analysis is a critical one. And even though I do think it's important to realize that we have improved decade over decade in terms of our murder rate, I showed that slideshow for a reason. It's not okay. And I do think that we have a unique gang problem, and we had these specific issues of disparate impact on certain neighborhoods and of the indiscriminate nature of these killings are issues that make our problem unique, more so than raw numbers, and those are issues that are tough to tackle, which is why I chose to talk about that today.
Very good. Mom, how did he do? How about a round of applause? Zach?